speakers that we have. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Just in case you've joined us just now, it's time for us to move on quickly to the speakers that we have here for the fireside chat. Now, when we say fireside chat, of course, you've got to have firebrand speakers, two of them coming together. But let me tell you a little something about this chat. Now, AI is touted as a harbinger and beacon of hope to solve large, complex, and unresolved problems of enterprises, nations, society, and humanity, with increasingly intricate and eccentric geopolitical, macro, and microeconomic indicators in the equation. Now, how does AI become the force propellant for solving spectrum of gigantic issues and challenges ranging from climate control, crime prevention, healthcare and judicial reforms, city congestion, and others? This is why I'm going to request you to tune into this lovely conversation, a fireside chat between Pankaj and Paritosh, who will ruminate on AI attempt to tackle the vicissitudes of global challenges. A little about our speakers here. First, to start with Paritosh. Paritosh is the Senior VP, Digital Platform, Reliance Industries. Paritosh is currently the Senior Vice President and Group Head for Analytics and Strategic Initiatives function at Reliance Industries Limited, India's largest private sector corporation and a Fortune 500 company. He has extensive experience in setting up and delivering analytics and digital practices for GE, Deloitte, and Eaton Corporation. And during his career, he has worked in different domains, including risk management, marketing, and manufacturing in diversified industries. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. Welcome the one, the only Senior VP Digital Platform, Reliance Industries, Paritosh Anand. And with Paritosh, adding that firepower and this fireside chat is who better than him, of course, Senior Vice President Strategy, Wells Fargo, Pankaj Rai. Now, in his professional career spanning 25 plus years, Pankaj started as a management consultant at Feedback Ventures and then went on to work in the financial services industry in India at ICICI. And his GIC career began with him leading the program management office at Standard Chartered Bank in their Singapore regional office, wherein he helped grow their shared service centers in India and Malaysia. And Pankaj is also passionate about D&I and sustainability initiatives. And so without further ado, welcome the Senior Vice President Strategy, Wells Fargo, Pankaj Rai. But before we move on, okay, gentlemen, you've got to keep track of the time because you will be hearing a gong that will play 3 minutes just before your fireside chat ends. Please conclude and end it on time. And now, handing you over. This is how the gong will sound, by the way, just in case you didn't know. This is how it's going to sound, okay? So be prepared. I hope you're ready. It's not playing, is it? Okay, I tell you what. Okay, it was playing, but then you couldn't hear. Okay, here it is. This is how the gong will hear. Okay, I hope you're ready. Okay, now over to Pankaj and Paritosh. Go for it.
Thank you, Riaz, and I must compliment you for having Shashi Tharoor as your speech.
Pankaj, you're not here on the audio, Pankaj. Pankaj, I think you've gone on mute.
Sorry.
We couldn't hear anything of the last minute. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I just started by complimenting you on having Mr. Shashi Tharoor as your speechwriter, because you gave a very excellent first paragraph, which was hard to follow when I was looking for my dictionary. But coming to our topic, Paritosh and I are happy to be here. We realized that the 3AI team has come up with some kind of an AI engine which tries to allocate the most difficult topics to Paritosh and I. And we were wondering that if we could build an AI and solve this problem, then we could have our avatars do this. But unfortunately, we couldn't the paucity of time. So here we are. So what we thought we will do is maybe I'll have Paritosh talk a bit about where he sees AI has come from, where it is, and sort of the lay of the land. And then we'll delve into what are some of the problems and issues that which are unresolved, and we can talk more about that. So Paritosh, how about some thoughts from you on the overall picture?
Sure. Thanks, Pankaj. And Riaz, I'm very envious of your energy levels. So AI to me, right now is the most used word in any CEO's dictionary or the jargons or any analyst report. And for the same reason, it is one of the most abused words as well currently. So, but we have to understand, what AI is and what AI can do, and who best to quote other than the Andrew Ng, who has probably defined it as a narrow AI and a general AI. And most of the narrow AI which we are seeing, most of the AI which we are seeing in our organizational context is actually narrow AI. And narrow AI refers to solving of specific focus problems, the kind that needs only a tiny bit of human intelligence, but fast. most of such problems, when attended by a human, would take a few moments to be solved. Common examples, which we do are, predictive modeling, machine learning algorithms, object detection, such as facial recognition, handwriting recognition, and OCR. So there are abundant examples of such applications that are getting solved in all of our organizations we see, and that's where the AI is progressing. Now, when we talk about the societal context, or a general AI, it really refers to a highly evolved intelligent machines, and the kind of stuff you see in Hollywood movies, those are the ones who have glamorized it. That very closely mimic human intelligence on a much broader range of parameters, and not just very specific problems which we are trying to solve in our organization. They should be able to think and strategize, deal with boundless complexities and chaos, improvise, innovate, and probably deal with issues with much finesse in any situation. Unlike narrow AI that tends to emulate selective cognitive capabilities in response to a sensory input, general AI aims to digitally evolve much larger from a human mind, from a image of a human mind, as a strategic thinking and creative angle. So what I would suggest is, before we delve into this problem, it is very important to understand and distinguish between this narrow AI and general AI. And narrow AI is where we are today, and general AI is where we wish to be. And most of the societal problems which we are facing as a part of a country or continent, or overall as an economic spectrum, they belong to a class called wicked problems, and that is where the general AI is very important. So over the next few minutes, probably Pankaj and I would probably want to distinguish between AI, complex and unresolved problems with AI in an organizational context, as well as a societal context. Pankaj.
Thanks, Parishor. And I think, as we were discussing the other day, I think one of the things that we thought was, how do we determine what are the more difficult or the more complex problems that are worth solving? Where is it that, we should focus our energy on and our efforts on? I think one of the ways to look at that area is look at where the money is flowing. Being someone who's worked in the financial services sector, I always say, follow the money, look at where the money is flowing. So one of the ways to look at that was, where is the asset under management, investments, what is that world talking about? What are they thinking about? So just to give you some statistics, if you look at the overall, assets under management globally on what type of funds are deployed, that whole industry is worth about $100 trillion, which is very close to what the global GDP also is. And the amount of money which is flowing into what is called ESG funds, and we'll talk more about that, is close to $17 trillion. So about 15-20% of our money is flowing into that area. And ESG really stands for environmental, social, and governance. And this is an area which is sort of gaining ground. It's not a new area. ESG is a term actually which was conceptualized probably 50 years ago. If you were to go to the Morgan Stanley Composite Index area website, all that, they'll be talking about some of these things. But this has started to gain ground only in the recent past. And a lot of money is flowing there. In fact, BlackRock and then Vanguard, they are the two largest asset managers in the world. The BlackRock CEO has been talking very, vociferously that they will not invest in companies if they do not follow ESG principles and guidelines. So essentially, you will notice these days, even in the annual reports and financial statements, companies are being forced to declare their ESG metrics. And now these ESG metrics are very, very, very difficult. There is no very standard definition. Environmental, depending on what your industry or company is, it could be related to your carbon footprint, your waste disposal, any way which you interact with the environment. If you are a mining company, are you doing deforestation, stuff like that? So you have to determine what those, metrics for your industry are. The social metrics are more related to people, your diversity, inclusion type of policies, your LGBT policies, those types of activities come under the social, category. And governance is related to your board, how the board, are they looking at the CEO pay as a metric and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of activity happening in the ESG space. Metrics are being defined, companies are being asked to become more conscious. And I think this is also related to some of the other trends that you see globally related to conscious capitalism or socially responsible investing and stuff like that. So I think this ESG, is becoming a big deal. And I think that this is going to become bigger and bigger, and we need to focus our energies on that. And on that note, I think Paritosh has had a lot of experience in the world of manufacturing, where some of these things are far more relevant than, let's say, in some other areas. So I'd probably throw it back to Paritosh and ask him on what has he seen on what's going on in the AI field, people working on these social type of causes, and what's his experience in that area.
Sure. Thank you, Pankaj. So if I again switch it back to my organizational context hat, there are two problems which I find personally very complex. One is ensuring workplace safety, serious injury and fatality in any manufacturing domain. It's one of the most complex problems to solve, not because we don't have data, but we have always had limited visibility in each of those silos. So a serious injury and fatality can be a result of different problems. It can be from engineering failures, it can be from non-compliance to procedures, it can be indiscipline, poor cognitive capabilities, lack of competence, poor training, bad work culture, perhaps weather and climate was not favorable on that day, employee morale, health, wellness, and so on and so forth. Now, do organizations really have all that's needed to model such a context? That's very important. We have probably done it. We tackle this piece by piece. We put in video analytics to see, okay, whether a person is in adherence to a basic, protection gear or not, or the person is, going to a restricted zone which he's not supposed to go. They have competencies in place, where they need to be certified before they, get into a manufacturing asset, operate a manufacturing asset. There is obviously health and wellness. There is sessions which goes on. But at the same time, while all these silos keeps on happening, still we see that workplace safety is of paramount importance and concern on any CEO's mind. And how can AI solve it? Do we have all the data? Probably yes. But more importantly, how do I merge all this data in such a complex situation, which has a human angle to prevent my workplace safety? So prevent my, ensuring my workplace safety, prevent a serious injury and fatality. So that's an organizational context which is very difficult to solve from an AI perspective. Second, I think probably is a digital twin, and digital twin is probably, one of the things which have been much talked about. But to really build a digital twin, it takes a lot more than just a few metrics and dashboards and some algorithms to model. You have to take care of the entire energy balance, material balance. You have to operate in very less assumptions and things like that. So these are some of the complex and unresolved problems which I think we would be focusing. The world needs to focus on, where it is not solving for point solutions, but for mostly from a global solution in terms of how do we solve it. Now that brings me to the societal context, and Pankaj, you will probably touch about the socio-political, economic, and cultural sphere here. So things like climate change, income disparity, healthcare, those are the realms of general AI. And experts in this area, and policy research are still, deliberating how do I solve this, because as I touched upon, these are wicked problems. We don't know when the solution will be reached. There's not a local optima or a global optima, but this is a time where some efforts needs to be combined together as a society to take an attempt on these problems. Pankaj.
Yeah. Thanks, Paritosh. And you're right. I think that if you go away from the private sector toward the public space, I think water, sanitation, clean water, better agriculture, terrorism, global warming, all of these problems, security are all there. And I think firms like Palantir have focused on that. I mean, I would have said Pegasus was also trying to solve the terrorism problem, but now we don't know what else they were trying to solve. But I think there's a lot of, those types of problems which are out there. I think the main issue in solving some of those problems is the availability and the acquisition of data and the coordination between, within the government, there are different departments, or within countries and so on. So I think when we look at all these large, public problems, I think collection of data in a cheap way, and then, making sure that the data privacy is adhered to, making sure that all the constituents are able to share data and connect to each other. I think those are the more difficult problems which are in the realm of getting the data together, versus the AI issue. So I think things are happening in that direction. In fact, I remember a couple of months ago, a friend of mine who's a senior IS officer, he called me. He said, we are setting up an AI team. Tell me what type of a person should I hire? And I was telling him that I think to start with, you have to hire someone, who understands data, where it can be collected from, what kind of problems are easy to solve, because you want to show some success. You don't want to pick up the most difficult problem where data is not available and stuff like that. So I think the government has also got a, AI policy in place, the Indian government. I think globally also, many of the governments are focusing on this area. So I do have a lot of hope that some of our larger, more difficult problems in the public space are also being attacked, and a lot of private companies are getting involved in a public-private type of partnership is emerging. And on that note, I thought, Paritosh, maybe you can say a few last words, because I'm told that I think we are running out of time.
Absolutely, thanks, Pankaj. So what Pankaj and we discussed about earlier as that the need is right now of a decision intelligence and not necessarily artificial intelligence, an intelligence that enables decision maker to factor the complexities of these wicked problems and all of its variables, and their actors, over time. So tons of data, as Pankaj mentioned, it is available. Social, political, cultural, economic. All this data is being collected. That's the best part of it. How to make use of this data to augment this intelligence of human actors is the most optimal, problem which we need to solve. That is where I want to leave the audience with. It is not about just artificial intelligence which will be able to solve these complex and unresolved problems. There has to be intelligent augmentation of this as well, which would lead to augmented intelligence in order to solve these larger societal problems. In order to move from what we are doing well in our organizations with respect to an algorithms and a narrow AI, to take that leap of faith to a general AI aspect. And collaborations is very important, as Pankaj mentioned, public and private. So with that, we would want to leave for questions or any thoughts.
Back to Riaz. Thank you, everyone.
So PNP has worked its magic again. This is public and private, Pankaj and Paritosh. Everything's working in PNP right now. It's all going good. Thank you so much for the really fire-packed session, guys. I mean, it was a crisp, highly energetic, and highly confiding session in terms of how you can do the best, how you can make the best use of AI. And thank you so much for your words of wisdom, guys. And please enjoy the rest of the evening. With that, ladies and gentlemen, time for us to move on to our next session. So may I please request the console of the backend to please switch us over. But remember this, you don't have to do anything, just stick with it. Just maybe take a sip of water and maybe just munch something. We'll be back in 15 seconds. Don't go anywhere.